All right, my name is Reverend T. I am the unrefined priest, and today I got a great video for you. We are going to be looking at the new docuseries that is coming out on Amazon and I believe Apple as well. It comes out today, I'm pretty sure, and it is called The Religion Business, and it is addressing finances in the church, how churches get their money, what churches are doing with that money, and generally the docuseries is exposing some of the fraudulent dealings that churches have with money. It is primarily dealing with mega churches and the prosperity gospel and that sort of thing, but it does funnel down into pretty much all churches across the board. And so in my own experience, I've worked in multiple churches, in multiple different denominations, and I have never worked in a church that has not had a financial indiscretion in its past ever. This is just something that is part of the church and part of the process of being in the church. It's always been an issue. And so this series is exposing a little bit of that. And if you know anything about me, I am all for that. I am no fan of the prosperity gospel. I am no fan of these mega churches bringing in millions of dollars that are unaccounted for. Nobody knows where the money goes. There's no transparency. So let's get the exposure going. I love it. I love that somebody is finally willing to do this work. Now, in full disclosure, I am an Episcopal priest. I work for the Episcopal Diocese of Central Florida. I work in a church in that diocese that does pay me a salary. So I am, I am very much involved in this. If you were to see what I make from the church, I don't think there's a person out there that would be like, oh my gosh, that's extravagant. We got to get rid of this dude. This dude's part of the problem. I get a normal everyday paycheck. But I did want to put that out there just so that you know that I am somebody who does make a living off of being a preacher and an administrator of the sacraments in the church. So let me get this Brandon Tatum video going, because Brandon's going to interview these two guys that are making this docuseries. And then after that, I have another video from a Christian YouTuber named Ruslan, and I hope I said that correctly. He's going to unpack this a little bit further, because I love that they're doing this, and there's some really good in this, but there's also some not so good in this. And so I want to kind of bring to light the good and the bad of this docuseries and just give you like a different take on it. So let me get this video going and we will jump right in.
How many churches are actually corrupt percentage-wise, meaning that out of all the churches that exist, roughly speaking, how many are corrupt? And then the other question, I'll stick with that question, then I'll wait to ask the other question. I don't want to convolute the two. So, just your experience, because I know you guys didn't visit every single church in the United States of America, right? You go down the street and three churches on each corner,
sure,
because people have just bastardized having a church. It's almost like I have a church here, but then I don't like the way this pastor is doing it, so I'm going to start a church across the street. It's crazy because they can all pool resources, they work together. But they want different churches. But how many churches do you think would be like fraudulent?
I would take all of them. And here's why. Here's why. And I'm not like, my brother-in-law was a full-time pastor. My brothers work in ministry. Like, I have such a love for the church, but you know the saying or the story where Christ talks about building the house on sand,
right?
Versus on rock,
right?
And so we go to the bedrock of the institution, and the bedrock is the laws that regulate these institutional churches and these religious organizations. The laws are broken and corrupt, and so what I mean by that is you can have the best intentioned leadership start a church, And what happens when you start something small? It's a startup. You pour everything into it, but as it gets bigger, you're like, oh, there was $1,000 given this weekend, and then 2 years later, you're like, oh, there was $100,000 given this weekend. And we always say, what's one of our biggest sayings?
Humans are human.
Humans will human. And all of a sudden, when we're like, hey, we have $1 million cash in the bank, and there's no anybody really looking at what we do. You know what? We built this. Let's take a vacation.
Yeah.
And I always use the analogy of it's like, hey, you work really hard, and you're in this startup, and you're like, hey, babe, let's go have a steak dinner. We've worked hard. And so you just put that steak dinner on the church's card.
Yeah.
And then 2 months later, you're like, you know what? You've worked hard. I want to buy you some leather boots. And it just becomes this precedence that's set that this is actually mine. And since there's no outside pressures keeping you accountable, eventually the system starts to dissolve.
And this is
all right. So I thought Officer Tatum asked an amazing question, and the question is, what is your estimation on how many churches are doing shady things financially? And the response of this guy, who is these two guys are the guys that are making the docuseries. The response of this guy is all of them, and this is where I have great difficulty with what he's bringing up, because I don't think that this guy understands what a lot of churches have done so that this isn't a reality. So there's a part of what he says that I think is true and right. And that is, if you just open up the church finances to the clergy, I think that that's a very dangerous practice. And I think that you would have the vast majority of people taking advantage of it because, as they said, people will do human things. And a human thing is to feel as though you've earned this money and this is in part your money. Here's where I think they've gone off the rails. I don't think that they've gone to churches that have actually put systems in place to make sure that that can't happen. Like, for example, in my own case, I do not have access to the church funds. Now, I have made sure that I do not have personal access to the church funds. And if I were to access the church funds, that would tip off a variety of people in the congregation. It would tip off the treasurer. It would tip off the parish administrator. People would know because I'm not supposed to have access to the church funds. And so, yes, I understand what they're saying, but that's just not the reality. Most, at least in the denominational churches, there are systems in place to prevent that to prevent what he is talking about from taking place. So to say all of them is just not correct. Now, could you say all of them could easily fall prey to doing this? Yes, myself included. And that is why it is very important to me that I don't have access to the church funds. Like, I want absolutely I don't accept money, like cash money from people. I will accept checks if they're written out to Holy Apostles Church, but I don't accept cash from people. I always filter it into the church because I don't want access to that. And most churches that are Presbyterian, Lutheran, Anglican, Methodist, they have systems in place to prevent against this sort of thing. So in your non-denominational churches, that may very well not be the case. In your mega churches, that may very well not be the case. But certainly in a lot of churches, there are systems in place that prevent stuff like this. So I don't believe that he's being accurate here really kind of at all. And now I have another video that's going to show you some more of the inaccuracies that are coming out as a result of this docuseries. Ruslan's going to do just an excellent job of pointing out some of this. Again, I in no way want to bash this docuseries. I'm looking forward to watching it. I am excited for it. We needed something like this. But there's a point where you go too far. And I think that these guys that are doing the docuseries have taken this a little bit too far. So let me bring up this video because this one's really fascinating too.
Question would be, how prevalent are pastors who abuse this?
So small.
What percentage?
Yeah. I don't know.
Nathan thinks it's 51% of American pastors. He thinks it's the vast majority of American churches are doing this sort of stuff.
Wow.
I don't think that's accurate.
That's yeah.
I don't think the institutional church in America has 51% of pastors are abusing this. I think most pastors are struggling. Most pastors retire without any retirement. Mm-hmm. Most pastors can't afford to send their kids to college without debt. Most pastors aren't doing this. So what's happening is we're taking the fringe of the fringe.
Yeah.
We're taking the fringe of the fringe. The pastors who are out here with clothing allowances, with
we just happen to know the 49%.
Well, I don't know. And so the question is, how prevalent is this? I don't know. But even still, if a worker is worth his wages and an elder who teaches and leads church affairs, okay, ecclesial affairs, is worthy of a double portion, then why can't a pastor be able to buy a home in the neighborhood, in the area that they serve in?
Yeah.
Why can't a pastor have a nice car? Why, right? Like, and so it's like, you want other people to do okay, but you don't want pastors to do okay. And I don't think that's his heart, but that's how it's coming off, right?
Yeah.
And so it's now we're taking the text, we're contorting it. It doesn't mean meat.
Yeah.
It doesn't say meat in the KJV. It doesn't mean meat in any of these things. So it's not a worker is worth his wages, a worker is worth his food. And that's not what that's saying. It's saying wages.
And it's also not saying a worker is worth his food and clothes and shelter for the day, because we saw wages meant profit,
mm-hmm.
which means excess.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, after I've covered my expenses for the day, I ate for the day,
mm-hmm.
I paid my rent for the day, I did all these things,
mm-hmm.
I have excess, which also goes back to that verse that says a double portion or a double honor,
mm-hmm.
right? So it's like, okay, there is a profit built in.
Mm-hmm.
We see scriptural evidence for double honor, double portion,
mm-hmm.
so that would incentivize the idea that like, oh, they have excess so they can buy a home, they can do XYZ things.
Right. And so I don't think that this is this massive crisis happening in American churches,
mm-hmm.
right? And I think Nathan's handling of the text here, I can't find any of this in the Greek or the Hebrew.
Yeah.
And in this interview, he ironically keeps telling people to go back to the scriptures. And when I go back to the scriptures, you're fumbling the text.
Yeah.
It doesn't say Greek or Hebrew. He also cites just wonky statistics, 44,000 denominations.
Yeah.
Okay, that's been so debunked to the point where not even Catholics, serious Catholics, use that against Protestants. Because in that same study, you find this out. You find out that based on those statistics, there's hundreds of Catholic denominations, which Catholics would say is nonsense.
Yeah.
And then how that is measured is that 44,000 denominations counts every non-denominational church as its own denomination. So he's regurgitating this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so you get the point. One of the things that he's bringing up, and I find it interesting because when this guy talked to Brandon Tatum, he said all of the clergy are doing shady things financially. But here it's like over 50% are doing things that are shady. I think there's a real possibility that this guy's had some hurt from the church, and that he has primarily trafficked in large mega churches and not your standard church. Your standard church in the United States is anywhere between 50 to 200 people on a Sunday. That's it. They're pretty small. And when you have 50 to 200 people on a Sunday, you're not bringing in mass amounts of money. You're not. Trust me, you're not bringing in mass amounts of money. And so money, when you're not bringing in this giant amount of money is accounted for. And most clergy And I've served in the Presbyterian church. I've served in some small non-denominational churches. And now I am serving in an Episcopal church. Most clergy are struggling to get by. Like, that's just the reality. And so one of the things that Ruslan is bringing up is that you can take the fringe and you can apply it and you can say, this is happening in church, but you can't take the fringe and say, this is what is happening across the board. No, not every church and not every pastor or minister is Kenneth Copeland or Paula White or Joyce Meyer or Creflo Dollar or, all these individuals. That's why these people stand out, because they're doing something that other people weren't able to do or would not do. So I don't think that it's nearly as far gone as this guy is insinuating. And then, again, some of the statistics that he is using. All that I wanted to make this video for is to say, hey, look, this is coming out, and I think this is super exciting. I love exposing shady stuff in the church because we need to get them out. And unfortunately, you can't get them out without exposing them. So let's expose them and get them out. Not expose them and keep them, because that's what we oftentimes do. Or we shift them around like the Roman Catholic Church did. No, expose them and get them out of the church so that you have the true church that is actually doing the ministry of God. That's what we need to get back to. So I wanted to let you know that this is happening, that I'm excited about it, but there are some things that are not 100% in this docuseries. And I wouldn't take this docuseries as gospel across the board that this applies to every single church. And I think we need to be aware that that what they're addressing is taking place in these fringe churches, and maybe the fringe is a lot bigger than we thought it was. But it's certainly not 50%. It's certainly not all of them. And I do think that these individuals that are making the series needed to approach this with more responsibility on their shoulders. Like, it's not helpful to just shoot at all of them. All clergy are doing horrible things. More than 50% are stealing money. Like, that's just not helpful. It's not true, and it makes it so that people don't take you seriously because they know. Like right here, like Ruslan is like, all the stuff that you're telling me, you keep telling me to go back to the scriptures, but when I go back to the scriptures, what you're saying is not accurate. And if you're fumbling it here, are you fumbling it over here? And I just wish that they would have approached it in a more honest and sincere approach. And I think it would have been met with more excitement than it is. But that's what I got for you today. My name is Reverend T. I am the Unrefined Priest. If you like what I'm doing, hit that like button as well as the subscribe button. And I will catch you on the next one.